This is still an ongoing ordeal. It started last week and I'm still trying to figure out how to handle the insanity that has quickly taken over my life. I have recently moved to a new town and have been job hunting. I stopped by a hotel on the shoreline and went to see if they needed someone for the front desk. Inside was vacant, dark and smelt stale. The man behind the desk had an extremely thick accent and it was difficult for me to understand him. It seemed like he was the only person in the whole building and I got a strange vibe from the whole place, but stayed to fill in the application and turn it in as quickly as possible. I feel him staring at me the entire time. The man muttered something under his breath and took my application. After I left, I decided I most likely would not be accepting a position there because of the strangeness of the situation, and really regretted leaving my phone number, address and other personal info on the application. Later that evening, I'm at home watching the Olympics in my living room, around 10 or so. I go into my bedroom to grab the phone off the charger and I see that I have a missed call from just a few minutes earlier. It's strange for anyone to be calling me so late, but I redialed the number to satisfy my curiosity. A woman with a thick accent answers and demands to know who is calling. I politely told her that I had missed a call from this number. She starts screaming my name at the top of her voice and shouting no, 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 and then shouting my name again, and then hangs up. It freaked me out that she had used my name in her crazy talk, but figured it was some crackhead that misdialed my number. I take my phone with me back to the living room and sit down. Right then my phone starts ringing again. I answer and it's the man from the hotel yelling my name over and over again. He is screaming at the top of his lungs and I can hear the woman yelling too. I could patch pieces of what they were saying, but in between their accents and both of them screaming it was difficult to get it all. I heard, "Disturb my phone, disturb your life, you can't see," and that's about it. I hung up really fast and proceeded to flip out. They called back 14 times within about 20 minutes. Thankfully, I don't have my voicemail set up so they couldn't leave any messages. My husband came home around midnight and I told him what was happening. He laughed it off and said that they were probably on drugs and they just dialed my number to freak me out and fuck with me. I really hated the fact that these people had a decent chunk of my personal information, but I figured they were going too crazy to do anything but make creepy phone calls at night. I finally calmed down enough to go to sleep around 3 in the morning. About half hour later, I woke up to my dog barking, growling and charging to the back door. I know immediately something is wrong because she never acts like this and is well trained. My husband and I both sprinted to the living room and saw a hand reaching through the doggy door, clawing at a tile. I screamed and my husband grabbed me and we went into the bedroom and locked the door. I dialed the police and thankfully they were there within 10 minutes. The man was long gone, but I knew exactly who it was. I gave them my statement and showed them a call log from earlier. They called the number, but it was a prepaid phone, so there wasn't a lot they could do to trace it. By the time the police left, it was about 5:30 in the morning, which was okay with me since I wouldn't be able to sleep anyway. A few hours later, my husband, who was still really pissed off, and I decided to go to the hotel to try and get some information about the guy and inform the staff that this guy was nuts. We spoke to the manager there and he told us that the man I described had been fired a year ago for stalking a housemaid. I was like, what the fuck? What the fuck was he doing in the lobby last week then? They checked the security cameras and discovered that he was constantly around the hotel and staring into the windows. I guess he had snuck in while the managers left the desk right as I walked in. The manager contacted the police and I was able to file trespassing charges against him. Now, at least the police are looking for him. At this point I'm in tears. I had given a crazy person all of my info and he was harassing and stalking me. I'm still receiving phone calls from strange numbers during the night, but luckily he hasn't returned to the house as far as I know. I contacted my references I had used on my application to let them know what was going on. Apparently my old boss was left a voicemail at around 2 in the morning on Monday of heavy breathing and perhaps some sex noises and moans. The past week I haven't been able to sleep at all. I'm a nervous wreck and jump out of my skin every time the phone rings or I hear my dog barking. This definitely isn't the scariest story on here, but it's nice to be able to write everything out. I'm sure I will have an update in a week or two. I was 14 when this occurred, and I'm 22 now. But I still remember this in crisp detail, and it freaks me out to this day thinking what would have happened if things turned out differently. School was out for the summer, and I had convinced my mum to send me to Russia for a couple of months to visit my grandparents. We moved to North America when I was little, and I hadn't been back much since. Plus, I thought it would be fun going on my first trip abroad by myself. She agreed and off I went on my first transatlantic journey. My grandparents are great people and have always spoiled me and my mum rotten. And they were ecstatic their only granddaughter wanted to visit. So they planned a little vacation of their own with me a month after I arrived to a popular beach resort city in Turkey. We were to stay at a 5-star resort in Ankara for 2 weeks. I thought that was spectacular, getting to travel to not one, but 2 countries in one summer. And to a fancy and exotic place like Turkey too. I was dying to go. But full of disclosure, when I arrived to Russia, it wasn't really what I was expecting. My grandparents are really protective people and I couldn't do much or go anywhere by myself. So it got boring pretty fast and I spent most of my days playing PSP in my room. I was also accustomed to being active and wanted to do things like go jogging, which I did every day at home. So I gave my grandparents a hard time about that since they wouldn't let me go alone. And naturally they couldn't really keep it up. Then after about a month, the time came to go to Turkey, and I was super excited to finally get some freedom and change of scenery. I'd been pent up at home too long. The resort they picked was sprawled over a pretty large area, however, it was all very well secure and isolated from the rest of the city, and there was also a huge garden on the property which was ideally suited for jogging. This time I had my room separate from my grandparents, so I took the chance to go off by myself and explore the grounds. Most of the time I would go jogging in the mornings when it was cooler with my big old iPod, so I couldn't hear anything that was going on around me, but I figured it was pretty safe since it was a nice hotel with plenty of tourists. Then I started to notice him, a pretty innocuous seeming gardener in his late 40s, early 50s in a green uniform. I remember he looked like a shriveled old date from too many years in the sun. He would always wave or say something in broken English as I passed by while he trimmed the shrubs or mowed the lawn. I would politely wave back, smile or nod. I didn't really pay much attention. Fast forward about 10 days and I was really enjoying myself. It was fun to swim in the pool and the sea. The food was great and my grandparents had let up a little so I could do more by myself. However, they didn't know about my morning runs in the gardens, and I wasn't going to tell them because I wasn't sure if they would approve. So one morning at around 7 AM, while I'm jogging, I see the gardener again. But this time it's clear he's trying to get my attention. He waves at me and yells something, so I stop and pull out my earphones, trying to figure out what it is that he wants. Now, I know he works for the hotel, so I don't really suspect anything. He waves at me again and motions me to come forward. I'm confused, but I figure he wants to tell me something, so I politely approach. He's standing at the trail that goes deeper into the gardens and the foliage. He's smiling and gesturing, and and I can see that he's holding something in his hand. "Rosa," he says. "Beautiful Rosa." Then I notice he's holding a red rose and extending it to me. At this point I'm confused and a little freaked out about what the hell he's thinking, but I stay put. Usually the hotel staff there are chatty, but nice enough. My grandparents would always get pulled into conversations with them about things. I figure it's something like this now, and don't want to be rude, but still want to be on my way without offending the old man. He hands the flower to me and I take it, thinking maybe he wants to show me some roses that are in bloom. But he keeps waving and gesturing like he wants me to follow him, and stupidly I walk forward. He has another flower in his hand and he backs away more. Then suddenly he stops and starts to lower it a little. That's when I notice he's holding his other hand behind his back too, and he's holding something. I look ahead up the trail and see a little cabin type thing where I assume they keep their gardening supplies. Something clicks in my head and I instantly back away. He sees me do that and he tries to smile, saying "Rosa" again, and moves the hand that he's been holding behind his back while lurching towards me. That's when I see what he's holding, some kind of rag. Without hesitation, I drop the rose that he has handed me, turn around and run for it at full speed. I don't stop to look back and I run like mad back to the hotel. It's not until the doors close behind me and I'm among other people that I look back and see if he has followed me. I don't see him anymore and my heart is beating like crazy. I go back to my hotel room and wait for my grandparents to wake up. I never told them any of what happened that day and spent the rest of my vacation glued to their side. I thought that if I'd said anything, they would get even more paranoid about my safety and blame me for wandering off on my own. Also, I didn't want to ruin the remaining days for them. I saw the gardener once more on the beach. I remember him talking to a security guard. I remember growing very uncomfortable and sinking into my sun chair when I saw him. Then he looked at me and smiled. I scowled at him and he mouthed the words "Rosa" tauntingly and smiled again. I still remember the anger bubbling in my stomach and how much I wanted to cleave his face in, but I just froze and stared. He walked away and I went back to pretending nothing ever happened. Needless to say, I never went on any more morning jogs, and neither did I want to until long after the summer had ended and I had returned back home. A while ago, I was staying at an upscale hotel in the safe area of a large Midwestern city. I am a 16-year-old female and I was in a room all by myself with my parents a few doors down. In theory, this isn't unsafe by any means, but I had bad luck on this particular trip. Our first night there passed without any incident. Me in my room, my parents in theirs. I watched a pay-per-view movie and ate way too much from the snack bar. I didn't have any real reason to feel unsafe. The next morning, we did the usual tourist stuff that one does when visiting a new city. As we ate breakfast in the hotel restaurant, I noticed a man who looked to be in his 60s staring at me for an abnormally long amount of time. I won't lie, as a young, decently attractive female, I'm used to getting the occasional inappropriate look from a guy. So I ignored it and I chalked it up to him either being a perv or thinking I looked like his granddaughter or something. The next night, my parents allowed me to meet up with a friend for dinner who lived in the area. He met me in the hotel lobby and we had a nice dinner and then went back to the hotel for drinks. Yes, I am underage, I had a drink, shoot me now. Coincidentally, the same man who had been eyeing me earlier was at the bar. This time I knew I didn't remind him of his granddaughter. Even with my buff guy friend next to me, his eyes traced every curve of my body. I felt unsettled and mentioned it to my friend Ethan, who glanced over and also seemed really weirded out by how obvious this guy was leering. We left the bar quickly, and by now it was around 12:30 AM. Ethan walked me up to the elevator of the hotel, and once I pushed the button, he left. I wish I would have asked him to stay, because no sooner had he walked away, my creeper friend come rounding round the corner and stood there waiting with me for the elevator. I felt so uncomfortable knowing that he would be seeing what floor I was going to, but it hadn't occurred to me to get off at a different floor at the time. And even if I did, he planned on following me, so it would have been just as bad a move. When we were in the elevator together, I tried to keep my eyes averted from his, but they literally bore into my body. He kept trying to step closer and I kept backing up, too scared to even speak. What freaked me out even more is that we hadn't even pressed separate elevator buttons, so he planned on getting off when I did. When I got to my floor, I almost ran to my room, and the guy just stood at the end of the hallway, waiting to see where I was going. I stayed in my room for about 15 minutes, until I was sure he was gone, before I told my parents what had happened. They were freaked out, and they told the hotel staff, but there was no sign of the guy, and it was really late, so I just locked my door and tried to get to sleep. I had almost drifted off when I heard a knock at my door. Now, I'm not an idiot. I've creeped this subreddit and no sleep for a long time. I didn't just go up and answer the door at nearly 2 AM. Instead, I turned on the light and froze. At this point, my intuition had kicked in and I knew it was this guy. I was near tears, but the knocking kept continuing harder and harder. So I finally shouted and asked who it was. The voice that replied to me was the most chilling thing that I have ever heard. High pitched but growly, almost giggly, and so disturbing I can barely describe it. "It's hotel staff, please let me in." I was terrified. A look through the peephole confirmed that it was actually this creepy old guy. I locked myself in the bathroom and called my dad's phone. So he answered me almost immediately, and I tried to tell him what was going on through my tears. "The guy from before," I managed. "He's at my door." What happened next gives me nightmares. My dad naturally went into superhero mode and opened his door to find the old man, in just a robe, masturbating. It's pretty obvious to piece together what he was planning, and I still dream about it and have severe PTSD from it. My dad slugged the dude in the face and made sure he didn't move an inch while my mum called the hotel security. We pressed charges and the guy is now in prison on what I think are assault with intent to commit rape charges, but I could be wrong.